It was like a party in that harvest field. They were all there. Mrs. Pottage was handing round sandwiches, Granny Dryden was going round with a basket of scones, and Miss Hubbard was pouring drinks. Katy and Tom and most of the children from the village were running and playing in the stubble. The Reverend Timms was taking pictures of everyone. Peter had almost finished cutting the corn. He had stopped to join in the picnic, and the combine stood quietly at the far side of the field. There was a trailer full of barley, and long lines of straw lying across the field. Just as Pat sat down on a sunny patch of grass, with a glass of cider and a newly baked scone, there was the sound of a tractor in the lane.
"Look out, everyone!" called Mrs. Pottage. "It's Ted with the baler. All to the sides of the field, please."
The baler came rattling into the field behind Ted, and they all scurried to the hedges. "We don't want anyone getting baled up in a parcel of hay," said the Reverend Timms. "Where could we post them?" said Pat. "To Cornwall," said Peter.
"Too corny for me," said Miss Hubbard.
"Oh dear," said Peter. "I'd better get that combine and trailer out of the way." The binder rumbled round the field, gathering up the straw that the combine had left. It made the straw into neat parcels and tied them up with string, just like Granny Dryden's parcel. It left the straw bales spread out in lines across the field. When the binder had gone off to the far side of the big field, Katy said,
"Please, Mum, can we play with the bales now?" "Well, if you keep over this side and well away from the baler," said Mrs. Pottage. "Promise?" "Promise, promise, promise," said all the children, and off they went, running and jumping amongst the bales.
What lovely things they were to play with! You could hide behind them for hide-and-seek. You could jump from the top of them. If you asked Pat to help you lift them, you could build straw houses with them. You could build bridges and staircases and castles with them. You could slide down them, sit on them, creep under them, lie on them. The children did all these things and more, and they had a wonderful time. What they had forgotten, but were soon to remember, was that the little bits of straw made you itchy and prickly all over, so that you couldn't sit still one single minute. All those children would find themselves popped in the bath before bedtime, and they would cry out when the water stung in their scratches.
"Oh, ow, it stings!"
And how many mothers would say,
"I told you so."
But smooth sheets and sleepy eyes would soon soothe all away, and make them forget. And they'd be back tomorrow and all summer long, playing about the fields and the hedges, and the barns and the streams, and among the trees. It was getting late in the afternoon, and the trees were stretching their shadows far out across the great field. More than once, Mrs. Pottage had called out,
"Come on, children, time to go home."
And more than once the children had shouted,
"Just a bit longer."
Miss Hubbard packed up and rode off on her bicycle, with her cider bottles clinking down the lane. Granny Dryden was off home to put the kettle on. And still the children played. The mothers came from the village to call their children home, and Katy and Tom were left at last alone, with Pat and Jess snoozing in the sun by the hedge, and Mrs. Pottage saying,
"Now it really is time to go. Father will be back from market and no tea ready for him."
She was walking about picking up sandals and cups and paper napkins and plates and all the things that people had dropped and forgotten. Then she said,
"Where is Katy's new woolly?"
"And where is my hat?" said Pat, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "Bless me, is it that time? We'll be missing our tea. Come on, Jess, help us to sniff out a hat and a woolly jumper." They searched all among the bales of straw. It was like looking in a maze. But search as they might, there was no sign of Pat's hat or Katie's jumper. Mrs. Pottage was cross.
Miss Hubbard spent a lot of time knitting that jumper, and then you go and lose it the first day on. Really, Katie?
Katie looked as though she might begin to cry quite soon. "I have a feeling it'll turn up," said Pat. "Remember that time when Katie lost her doll? Detective Pat found it in the end. Hello, what's that?" Pat was staring at a bale of straw as he was speaking. Between the ends of the straw he could see something blue. He poked his fingers into the straw and pulled at the tightly packed straw parcel.
"What have you found, Pat?" said Tom.
"Well, I'm not sure, but I'll tell you when I get this parcel open. I thought I'd finished with parcels for today. There's no address on it, so it's all right to open it." Pat took out his penknife and cut the string round the bale. He pushed his hand into the straw and pulled out a sleeve, a woolen sleeve. "Well, just look at this," said Pat.
"Is it?" said Mrs. Pottage.
"Katie's jumper," said Pat. "I think so. Easy does it. We mustn't pull too hard. My goodness, this is a good parcel. Dry your eyes, Katie. Look, there are your sheep. It is your jumper. You must have dropped it when you were playing, and then it got baled up with the straw. It took a long time to get the jumper out of the bale, and it needed a good shaking, but it was all right."
"Just look at that bale," said Mrs. Pottage. "Dad'll wonder what happened to it when he sees it." "What about Pat's hat?" said Katie. "It might be in another bale," said Tom.
They looked at all the bales and felt them and poked them. There was no sign of Pat's hat.
"Don't be sad, Pat," said Katie. "I'll find it for you."
"It's all right," said Pat. "I can wear my old one. But wherever can it be?" They looked a little longer in the hedge and in the long grass at the edge of the field, but they didn't find it, so they all went home to tea. It was Katie who found Pat's hat in the end, but he had a long time to wait for it. It was in the winter, when the cornfield was covered with snow. Katie was helping Peter to put fresh straw out for the cows. Deep in the middle of another bale, there was Pat's hat, as good as new. Katie shouted just in time to stop Peter from putting his pitchfork through the middle of it. He hadn't seen it. She took it into the house and asked Mum for a brush and gave it a good cleaning. What a surprise Pat had when he came with the letters and saw his hat waiting for him. He was very pleased to see it. "I was just going to buy another for Best," said Pat. "Mind you, straw post is a bit slow, but it gets there in the end. Thanks, Katie. Cheerio." And Pat was on his way again.
Postman Pat, Postman Pat, Postman Pat, and his black and white cat. Early in the morning, just as day is dawning, he picks up all the post bags in his van. Postman Pat, Postman Pat, Postman Pat, and his black and white cat.